Right, good evening. So, a bit of a compass and a bit of a discussion on a favorite subject, time. Found this thing in Madagascar and just love it. As time rolls around and we're all waiting for the firmware 3.0 to drop, there's something that I've been struggling with of late, and I think it would make a really good video. And what that is the concept of time or delay. I'm not talking 2290s or other famous delays or, you know, that kind of delay there. What we're talking about is a command that says wait. So how does this all tie together? If you look at the Helix Command Center, marvelous piece of software, marvelous piece of engineering. It's missing a very important key thing, or I haven't been able to find it. If you can find it, leave a comment. But I think this is something that needs to be addressed, and I don't think it's going to be coming in 3.0. I don't think anyone's ever really done this in Helix terms, but it is something that exists in the old Morningstar here. It also exists in this and many other Arduino based controllers, and it also exists in OnSong, and that is the delay or wait thing. What's the deal with that? Well, as you're programming your stuff and you're sending out commands across the network, and they're zipping back and forth, sometimes some pedals will get confused as the stuff goes across. Now, why that happens, I don't know exactly, but it does happen for sure. And Jason Kitchling of OnSong gave me good advice a long time ago: stick a delay in there. And Dom Alf, the daddy of this thing, I'm waiting for the new one to come along, we also use that, and it's used all the time in the Morningstar. What the delay does is, let me show you here on the screen if I can. I'm gonna flick this around, then I'll flip back. So, this is a big touch screen thing, and I think this will probably help. So you can set actions here: press, reset, long scroll, double tap, all this kind of stuff. And you can set up a command. What the delay does is it allows you to input a number of milliseconds, and they have fixed amounts: 200, 300, etc. Guess what? 300 is the exact amount of time that it takes for this thing, more or less. 300 mil is the exact time it takes for the plethora to switch boards. Why the plethora? What's that got to do with the old Helix? Well, down here, I went through, and I'll give you a link to a video. I set up this thing to remote control the old plethora here. Why? Mainly because this whole rig is going to go and live somewhere else. So why do you want this delay? What happens with it? Why is it such a huge deal? Let me try and explain that. Flip this around. Okay, here we go. All set, nice and lovely. So what goes on with the delay is, as you're sending out the Midi, this is especially true of the plethora, because it's taking time to reload the DSP, because DSP is such a big thing, and is you know, especially for someone with the stompy stomp and stuff like that, you really need this, and this does not exist at all in the Helix Command Center. So I'm really hoping that at some point in the future that will be implemented. I'm not going to be able to get to this tonight. It's been a long day, but I will be proceeding forth with this and trying to transfer all the work that was done there in the big Helix floor, squish it down, fit it in here, over 2 pages, and we'll see if that works. Coming up. Very important thing. If you're having difficulty with your MIDI networks, you're sending out commands like that, try it. You'd be surprised. Now, it may seem a little counterintuitive. The other thing that does this OnSong, let me flick to that and show you how it does it. Right. What you can do in here, Felipe, how's it going, man? Felipe's just rejoined the group. Great guy, you should go and see his videos. I'll put a link into some of them, because they're amazing. But action sign, we'll flick down here to Midi, events, send. So, what do we want to do? Program change, and flick along here to the plethora. Let's set up rock face. And that should be good. To add another one, delay. And again, this goes in 100, 200, 300 milliseconds. Perfect. Now, beyond that, I want to stick in a few CC commands for the plethora. And what I can do is go down, it's 100 and something they start on, so I can send plethora switch 1 on. Can then also send a new one, plethora switch 3, and we'll do plethora switch 5. Three. Pretty cool this, that you can add in exactly what these things do in English. I really like that. You can now do that in the MC6 as well. Done. So, in theory, this set of commands would work. The first one will send out APC to switch to the rock phase. It will then wait 300 milliseconds whilst it is doing it. It will then send out 1, 3, and 5 together. And that should work. The plethora can be interesting in this case because it takes time to reload. But the fact is, every pedal out there is going to have some sort of delay. Potentially as well, if you're running a whole bunch of stuff all at once, or if things are getting confused, this is something you'd want to add. And sad but true, that does not exist in the Helix world. So yeah, we're back out in the real world. That is certainly the case. Take note of it. It's one of the small thing, but I have found it to be a bit of a problem. So consider delay, the delay command, a crucial aspect of what would really help with MIDI controllers. And I think it's something that one could look at. The other thing, take this thing as a magnifying glass, is a way to think of the navigation of a morning star. With its banks, with its switching back and forth, with its delays, and this whole argument which I put forward 2 days ago on using multiple MIDI controllers. If you think about what would be a good way to implement it? Think about this good old pirate's compass as a guide to a map. Go with me on this. So if you have 6 switches available here, which is in fact 12 switches, copy and paste, imagine that's a 12 switch thing. And now expand it up to the roof for the 30 banks. What you can do immediately with the big old floor, or an LT, or an HXFX, and what will hopefully be coming in 3.2 the Stomp, is another command center. So yeah, missing that, but pair the two of them together. Yeah, missing time, but it does add all of this navigational aspects, which means the functionality of the MC6 gets spread out into one massive map, and you're essentially moving this around to focus on that little part of your huge functional MIDI map, which is very cool. It means that when you switch a bank, boom, we're on a random bank there. I'm going to now switch this to a different preset. Switch back. And that changed. I don't know if you remember, my boy Danny put up this super spiffy video pre-NAP 1,000 years ago, back in February, where the Stomp over there could switch presets. You could spin the knob, and the way that worked is you would turn on PCTX in the global settings. What the PCTX, PC transmit or PC receive does is it sends out, it advertises. And this was the one thing that the Stomp could do since day one. As you switch presets, so even if you had like a 2-button Mosky switch or whatever, you can have the Helix say to the world, hey, I'm switching now over this thing. And because the MC6 has an in, MIDI in, that's wireless right there. CME MIDI thing over there, and a tiny little, what's it called, this thing? Quick IU. The two of these are talking wirelessly, and the Stomp, or basically any MIDI pedal, can tell the Morningstar, I'm switching over to number 29, switch. And within the limits of the 30, that will switch. So you could, back in the old days, program the MC6 to stay in sync up to a certain number of things. You could also set in the command center a MIDI CC to toggle the page, something that I didn't do for a long time. What the hell was that? And that's very interesting because it will switch over from one side to the other, which is pretty damn cool. So that switches, and that switches, and switches, and switches, and switches. Very cool thing. Set up a MIDI CC. You can switch that. You can also set up MIDI CCs to activate those switches on there, and it doesn't care what that does. It's a very similar concept to the floor, where you can emulate hitting a switch, which is the same thing in the Stomp, which is the same thing everywhere else. you can send a CC, was it 51, 52, 53 command, and it's as if you are pushing that switch. What that switch does, you can then change as and when you like. The CC command is always the same thing. It's literally button, hitting the switch, and the switch does what it wants to do. Since 3.7, that's now in there. And that's sort of the thing of this whole conceptual video thing. Get your head into that. It's very cool because then other MIDI controllers can kind of like act as a virtual finger, like a real roadie, and whack those buttons. So one step ahead of that, think about how you're designing the MIDI. This is the main thing of the MIDI group. The MIDI itself is simple, but imagine if you're on stage. You could come up with a design. Like, you know how you do your password in your phone, if you have like a Samsung or something like that, and you've got to put in a number, or you can do a design. So some people will do an M or an L or an E or a sigma or whatever. It's a flow. It's a ideogram which you can follow. Put that on your feet. Now imagine if you're tapping away in the dark and it's confusing and you're playing something, you're going along and going along and going along. Instead of looking down at the floor and reading, there's my delay, there's my reverb, there's my ping pong tone, there's my slim reverb tone, making that connection in your head and going, what you could do is use snapshots, or what you could do is arrange the board so that when you're playing, when you're at home here working all this stuff out, you can arrange it any way you want. But in a flick of a switch, like you can on the Helix floor, you can hit the two buttons, switch things around. So you can move everything around now, and you could arrange everything so that while you're playing, you're just hitting first switch, second switch, third switch, fourth switch. Doesn't matter what it is, if it's jazz, if it's rock, if it's punk, if it's violins, who cares? 1, 2, 3, 4. That is in itself a fabulous thing. And that can be done here, and that can be done everywhere. So process that a bit. Time and navigation. Check you tomorrow.